Parks, Recreation, and Public Spaces meeting. So we've got Candace Winterbauer, Susan Hoover, and myself, Emily Franzen, the chair. We have two items on the agenda. One is a possible capital funding opportunity for some parks improvements, and the second one is going to be talking about Marsh Park and the potential of having signage to talk about its historic importance, as well as some tree planting possibilities. So with that out of the way, I gave you all some information. So the impetus for this was that late last year, Mary C. Miller met, and Susan Hoover, I don't know why I was saying your last name, but here you are, met with Cecil Thomas, who is our state representative. He talked to you all about the potential to use capital funds from the state to fund certain park improvements. And then we had a meeting with NOAA and other folks a couple weeks ago to kind of drill down on what that might look like and what makes sense. After the park audit, there were a couple things that were pretty clearly, like really wants that would fall under this. One would be splash pad, the other would be some sort of hiking or biking trail. So NOAA and I both thought we should put it in this committee so we could talk about what might make sense and figure out kind of some funding stuff for that. So for those, just to put it out there, from what we have learned, this is money up to $500,000 that the state could provide to us if we have a 50% match or whatever we ask for. That 50% match doesn't have to come directly from our local budget. It could be from an outside source. It just has to be some sort of money you put up to match whatever you're asking for. There are certain things that are eligible for it. There are certain things that are not eligible. And I'm going to grab this copy because I didn't print myself out a copy. Thought I'd have it on my computer, and I immediately exited out of it. That's cool. So stuff that's not eligible is anything that's like roads, infrastructure that needs to be maintained, basic operating expenses, libraries, police or fire stations, basically all the stuff that's like not really in the Parks and Rec kind of milieu. Things that are eligible would be stuff like falling under the categories of administrative buildings, and there's a couple of just very specific ones that don't apply to us. Adult and juvenile correctional facilities, which we don't have. Cultural and sports facilities, which we don't have. And then mental health and developmental disabilities facilities, again, no. And higher education facilities. So those five aren't really within Norwood. So what we do have are natural resources and parks and recreation facilities. And that can include stuff like recreational trails, swim pools, splash pads, aquatic centers, playgrounds and recreational facilities, boat docks, well, I don't have that, so scratch that. Community recreational facilities. So basically just kind of under the broader scope of stuff in parks. So our thought, based on the results of the survey that was put out, is that either a splash pad or walking/biking shared use trails might be the best use of these funds if we were to pursue them. So that's kind of the question we have now. We had talked to NOAA about, everyone basically is really a big fan of splash pads, but it may not be enough to pay for it, whereas a relatively small hiking or biking trail, that's something that could happen. So I figured I'd see if what you guys thought about it.
I think it's a great idea. In the meeting with now Senator Thomas.
Oh yes, not well, House rep. He was a House rep.
He was House rep when we met. He is now state. He's still our representative in the Senate. These are funds that Norwood has not gone after for many, many years, partly because you need the matching funds. We just haven't had the money. I loved the idea of splash pads until I started looking into how much they cost, and they're just ridiculously expensive. And it was pointed out to me that we do already have waterworks, and perhaps we should, utilize our funds differently. I think it's a fantastic idea. I think it's also important for folks to know that these are funds we can go after every few years. So it's not like a one and done. And I think we really should get into the habit of always having a project that we can seek additional funding for. So I'm all for it. I loved, in our meeting, we talked about doing a trail throughout Millcrest, connecting upper and lower, and try to activate that area and give some attention to middle Millcrest, which I've actually never been to before.
Yeah.
I know you have. But that would be a really good use of the funding. The other thing that I think is good to, or might be helpful, is if we could possibly get additional funding from our neighbors, because that, the walking trail, if that's the direction we go, would be right up against Bond Hill and Paddock Hills and kind of North Avondale. All of those communities are all kind of right there. And so I think there could be some additional funding sources if we collaborate with the other communities.
Is there a timeline on when we receive the money that we have to spend it?
I think that it has to be something that you plan on completing within 2 years of receiving funds.
Okay.
Because it's every odd year.
Well, yeah, I wasn't sure if you could like accumulate, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
okay.
I don't think it's something you're supposed to bank. I think you're supposed to have a project in mind and do it.
And spend it within the 2 years.
Yeah.
So the max that we could do would be $10,000.
500,000.
500,000.
Yes.
Okay, I heard 5,000, so I was like, how are we gonna do? Okay.
No,
Well,
no,
extra zero.
Very
I was
different.
like, what are we gonna do for that?
No, so from what he said, so they could give us $500,000.
But we would need-
We would have to match
That's the max.
Yeah.
So
So-
you could get some, like a.
We could
something
ask for 100,000.
And it's a 200,000.
Yes.
Okay, all right.
So,
Now
so
I'm
much bigger scope,
Yeah,
much bigger
now it's making
dreams.
sense. So, looking at some of these, and again, I'm just asking questions. Yeah, the splash pad's great, but all that hiking, biking. The watershed flood control. Like, I mean, I know that wasn't necessarily maybe on the parks survey or anything like that, but we do have,
Huge flooding issues.
and I know, but this is centered around parks, so, I mean, is it, or is it?
I think it's meant to be more of like,
Like if we had a river or a
Yeah.
stream coming through?
yeah, I mean, that's something I can check, but my impression was it wasn't meant to be like issues with flooding or sewage.
Okay,
Or anything like that, unfortunately, because that
Yeah.
would be a great use of the money, I agree.
yeah.
That would
what they
be
did at
infrastructure.
Yeah, that would have to be, that would be basically like a long-term infrastructure thing,
Okay.
as opposed to something that's more,
It's natural.
natural resources would be the watershed.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I was just thinking of what they did at, I almost said Norwood, not that one, Burwood, how they
Right.
put the French drain in there.
Right.
To help control that, so I know there's waterlogging and other
Yeah.
parks that, okay. And then, so the community recreational facilities, and I was like looking through to make sure, so would that entail our community rec center and the rec center, or would that be considered under the city umbrella and we can't really utilize the money there?
You could use it for the community, either the rec or the community center.
Okay.
Because they're both recreational facilities.
So they're under that umbrella too?
Yes.
Okay. And this just like came up because we were talking about it more in the housing meeting, but the workforce development and training. Again, I know this isn't on the park survey, but like we've been talking about that kind of Savior or the Chamber of Commerce of like creating some type of workforce training. I don't know. I just thought that was maybe down the line, something we can look at with that amount of money. I mean, it'd be great to have I mean, utilize the community center for that.
Right.
For technology, all of that. So, again, down the line, I know I'm kind of going outside of the park
No,
center.
it's something that, since it is part, like, we started talking about this just because it was something that we
Yeah,
thought
yeah.
the parks might use, but I mean, it doesn't have to be that. It can
Yeah.
be any one of these other things, as long as they're eligible.
When we were first talking about it, the reason the parks came up was because that felt of all of them the fastest we could turn around.
Yeah, we have things that.
Whereas
we have a
I
list.
think your ideas are fantastic. That could be
More of
for
a
the
long
next,
term.
that could be in the
Yeah.
next cycle, which would be 2020.
2025,
26,
Yeah.
yeah,
25,
because it's
right.
odd years.
Which I
Where
mean,
you
if
apply
we-
in odd years and you get the money in the even year.
Yeah,
Yeah. And so that's something like we could like have it ready to go.
right.
This is our plan, all of that. Because I know the school's also been talking about kind of creating more of a continuing education there. So the biking, hiking, kind of thinking that.
That was kind of our initial thought, and the thought was, basically, we're also kind of working on trying to eventually connect Wasson Way with the park. We could use the money to make what would eventually be a little loop that would connect with that potential Wasson Way connector. It would just be like kind of 3 legs of the loop, if we're thinking about it as like a weird square.
Yeah.
But it would still be useful even without that, because right now there's not a great way to get between Upper Millcrest and Lower Millcrest at all.
It's a good workout.
And the middle, yeah, and the middle Millcrest right now, the one that's chained off that you would get off on Hopkins, isn't really being used at all. So the idea would be you would kind of run down there, maybe in addition to this, add some more lighting, some more landscaping in some of these areas as well. Run down there, run parallel to Hopkins, and then swoop around, run parallel to Victory Parkway, and then go up kind of near Sherman to go past the baseball field and connect to that parking lot area up there.
Nice.
So it's about 0.6 or 0.7 miles of trails, so not like a huge amount, which makes it easier to fund. And potentially, depending on how much it costs, we could add like a little middle part too, like in addition to like the circle, have one part kind of maybe going along back where the stairs used to be. Like have that be a little spur as well.
Okay.
So that was kind of the big idea. I don't have like any plans or drawings, but I can picture it in my mind. It's beautiful.
So yeah, I mean, what would be the next step for that?
So, yeah, the next step would be, I would talk to Darren and ask if he could like get some estimates on how much it would actually cost. And then we definitely want to look at potential outside sources of funding to help with that and see in our budget what we have to offer as well. It doesn't have to all come from one source. It can be multiple sources as long as the money is there and we have it, either in our budget or it's been given to us expressly for this, then the state will be happy. And Cecil has said at least that he's going to be an advocate for us and has said to contact his office with any questions, and if we want help, they can help us kind of make sure our application and the information we provide is what they really want to see. So,
Great.
because I know sometimes with any application, you kind of have to shape it around what they expect to see, and it's good to have the language right, so.
I know there was already some money allocated for Millcrest for, was that honeysuckle removal or something like that too?
Yes,
Is
that
some
might
kind
be
of-
part of it, like, we'll have to remove some honeysuckle at
Yeah.
least. So, and I know the Boy Scouts are doing some stuff with some of the more rustic trails down there with like signage and stuff. So I figured that might be a way to get them involved, if this ends up happening, that could be a part of like helping remove some of the honeysuckle or just adding signage to the new trails or what have you, so.
Cool.
I thought would be fun. So that was kind of my thought.
Does it feel like, just project planning brain, should we already, I'm thinking we should start thinking about who are some of the other funding sources. Maybe trail people.
Tri-State Trails,
Yeah,
around Cincinnati.
there's gotta be some federal
There are,
monies as well.
There are definitely this kind of stuff for like shared use trails. There's a decent amount of funding in some areas. It's just a matter of finding them and getting the applications in. So that's something I can also ask Darren about if he has any ideas. And the folks from Tri-State Trails, like, I can reach out to them and say, hey, this is what we kind of want to do. Obviously, we're looking to the future with the larger, plan with having that trail run through Millcrest to Wasson Way, but this is a little easier to do. Do you have any hints? So that was my thought. Yeah, and the Wasson Way, what we're calling the Wasson Way connector is something that wouldn't happen for a couple of years, at least, unfortunately, just because of how the timeline is for getting money, but the
To
hope
already have
is,
that in place could be a motivator and maybe a, hey,
yes, like,
we're
hey,
investing here.
we are investing here, we really want to see this happen, here are funding agencies, see, we've committed, so.
Do you think it'd be worth kind of, maybe like once we have the plan scoped out, putting it out there to the residents of like saying, hey, this is how much it's gonna cost to get this match money? Like, we're looking for outside sources just to see if anyone else in the community.
I don't think it's a bad idea.
Just to put it out there.
Yeah.
Say, hey, we have X amount in our parks budget for this, but we need X, Y, Z amount to come in to get this matching grant.
Yeah, I think it would be a good idea, especially if we can get a mock-up of what it might look like, and say, like, here are the costs associated with, we've researched it, this is how much it's going to cost. Once we have those hard numbers and we have a plan in place, that makes it more attractive to people that might have some deeper pockets.
Does it have to be in by a certain time, or is it just any
Yes.
time of an odd year?
No,
you can
It's
that's a date.
late summer
Late
is.
summer? That's
Yeah.
what- Okay, late summer.
It is the end of summer was when, it's in the email, I don't think
Okay,
it's
yeah,
in
I have it
here. But if we get started now, we'll have plenty of time to track down other funding sources, get everything set
Yeah.
up. The information on the project isn't too onerous to do once we know where the funding is coming from. And once we have an idea of what it looks like, all of this is pretty much, describing how supporting this project will benefit the general public. Like, where is the money coming from? It's all pretty
Yeah.
basic stuff compared to some of the other reporting that some, like federal funding especially, asks for.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going like 5 years out, because that's just my brain.
Yes.
So, and I know we've all been talking about this too lately, like having those set goals. Do you think there's a good timeline of like, okay, next year we know it's an even year, but let's have, I know you've been doing the surveys and all of that,
Yeah.
but like maybe setting up projects within those surveys of like, okay, this is an odd year, let's have it all ready to go, by this date, X, Y, Z, so it's just
Yeah.
like, we know it's coming. And then that might help other things, we know
Yeah.
like, okay, hopefully we'll get this money and we can.
Yeah, but maybe
allocate
there's
money
another
elsewhere.
source we find that also would work for this. Yeah, just having plans
Yeah.
in place for not just park stuff, but like workforce
Yeah.
development stuff.
So just like that timeline, okay, by the end of an even year, we're gonna have exactly what we wanna do, that project to go. And then, just kind of that ball rolling, the expectations are there, and we know.
Yeah.
And I think that'll help just the, how we spend money in the budget.
I really think this should be more institutionalized, just so,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yep, that's what I was, just like, okay, dates, kind of like, okay, it's end of October, even year,
we need to
let's
start,
start talking about this, or if we already know, let's start building the plan.
yeah, so having a schedule or having timelines for each year of what we need to do for different types
Yeah.
of things. Yeah, I mean, that's a broader conversation for a
It
lot
is.
of things.
No,
in
but I
the
love this, that
government,
it's like
but
every odd
especially-
year, this is coming up. And like,
Yes.
I love that, and so
Yeah.
that's like, it's coming up, and just creating that time, and I know it's the first time we're all doing it, so it's just like, okay, let's see what works, but,
Yeah, I agree. That is something that I want to try to make sure the city does.
yeah, see what works, like, timeline, so it's not rushed, and it is.
Yeah, and we have
planned
time to think about it and not just
Yeah.
say, we're doing this.
Yeah.
reactive.
Reactive, yeah.
Instead of proactive.
Yes.
Yeah.
I can also reach out to OKI.
Okay.
And see if there's any funding there.
That would be great.
I was trying to get other ones.
And I had just, out of curiosity, I was looking up splash pad costs, just as an idea. So, just a couple days ago in Texas, there was a city council that approved funding for splash pads. One would be $350-ish thousand, the other one would be $250-ish thousand, with a annual maintenance cost of about $88,000. So
Wow.
I think
That's like
the initial
that's-
cost might be doable.
Yeah.
It's that ongoing.
The ongoing, I think, is going to be the issue, and why it might not be good to pursue it, even if we can like get it done. And I don't know how Texas prices compare to Ohio prices. This is the most recent one I could find, at least. But yeah, the maintenance of it seems to be the biggest ongoing cost, and that's why a lot of the pools that we used to have are closed down. So I don't want to add that back.
We need the manpower.
Yeah, so, but I think that's just something to think about, and I was interested to see how much it is costing.
Yeah.
Because I got all these different numbers from different sources, so this is like actual,
Just happened.
they approved
Really
this money,
happening
really
right now.
happening. 2 weeks ago, they approved this money, so,
Yeah.
yeah. So just something to think about for the future. I would hope if we get we're getting in a better financial position,
Yeah.
and if we can continue to invest in our rec, maybe that could be part of their operating budget in the future. Yeah, so we could absolutely, do it, but then we wouldn't be able to maintain it.
Sorry, I'm looking at this because it was private funding.
Yeah. So, again, that's
Let's
another
find out
way.
who their private funders are.
Yeah, San Angelo, Texas. Really? Maybe they're like Norwood, Ohio.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, yeah, that's what I had for the first agenda item.
Okay.
Anything else with that?
I just thought of one thing, the recreation facilities, I know there's a lot of people missing the gymnastics program from the rec center, and that was a big cost, so if that's, and I think that came up on the survey, I forget.
Yeah, there's some people that liked gymnastics stuff.
So I didn't know, and that's a whole other, coaches, teachers, equipment, all that, but,
Something to think about.
yeah,
Okay.
lots on the list.
So the second agenda item is just about Marsh Park. So I have one thing, and then I was going to see, Susan, if you had any updates with that. So the one thing I had is that there was a resident who lives right by Marsh Park who was interested in donating to, like, pine or spruce trees to be planted there. And she likes to use the park, and this would provide also some, like, it would help the city and also provide some screening for her property that abuts the park. But she is willing to pay for the trees and the labor and all that stuff that goes along with it. So my feeling on that was, obviously right now it's not great to plant it, but I was going to talk to Clint and see if there was a good place for them, make sure there's no like utility lines or any random places like that, and then get back with her and kind of see what her timeline might be for that. So.
Cool.
That's
Love that.
just something I heard from. Her name's Rebecca Bishop, very nice. She lives on either Ida or the street parallel to it, so, yeah. Just a fun, nice update.
Yes.
Love
Anyway,
trees.
Yep.
So here's my Marsh Park thing, and for those that don't know, Marsh Park was created in 1923 as a way to keep some black residents from building a home. It was not our finest moment as a city. Essentially, what we did as a city was they declared eminent domain and took the homes and made this a park. And that happened all over the country, but the fact that it happened here in Norwood is why I care. And so one of the things that I've been working on with Susan Daniels with the Historical Society is a historical marker, which we are in the process of finishing up. We have hundreds of pages of documents from the lawsuit, the census, newspaper articles, lots and lots of documents to back up those claims. So we're hopeful that we will be able to get the marker. And the marker simply just says what occurred in that space. Part of my hope for the park is that we do some sort of acknowledgement, and I use the word reclamation. Marsh Park is a great little park, and it shouldn't be anything different than it is. But my vision is to fold in some sort of artwork or sculpture or something that can sort of acknowledge where we were, where we are now, and sort of where we hope to go. I would also plan on seeking outside funding, that this is not something that would come out of the parks budget per se. I think there's probably going to be a lot of funding available for that sort of thing. And I'm going to be working with the art board as well, but kind of wanted to get a thumbs up, seal of approval, move forward from this committee. Again, my goal is not to change the park, but just, there are a lot of different ideas. I'm not an artist, but there's the two little basketball courts that are in not good shape. So it's possible we could fix those and make those decorative like we did at the at Waterworks. There's the or another idea that I heard was like make a mural walkway. So things that again would just be part of the park and not not changing anything about the footprint of the park. So yeah, that's also something that the DEI board will be discussing as well. So there's sort of lots of people's thoughts, and I can continue to loop it back and share where we're at and make sure that still is feeling like what makes sense in this park. Because it's a small little neighborhood park, but I think it's important for us to acknowledge why it's a park and why it's not homes, because they were homes. And that's all I have on Marsh Park.
Okay.
We'll be submitting the marker hopefully the end of February, and then we will know in the spring if we've been accepted or not. They only give 20 markers for the entire state of Ohio, and we're also trying to get one for the Norwood Mound. There was an application last year that had some problems, so it was rejected. You only get 3 shots. 3 shots or 2 shots at it. So we're going to try to do it again, and I'm hoping we also can get a marker for there, because that's obviously a really important historical site.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's great. I mean, acknowledging the history of that park is super important. It's something that I didn't know about until you had brought it up, and it doesn't change what happened, but we can at least reclaim it a little bit for the folks that used to live there and in their memories. So, and I think it's great to have, some public artwork there. I'm always a big fan of artwork. And, historical markers, always love them. So yeah, I think that sounds awesome to me. So thumbs up for me, yeah.
Sorry, one other thing I just thought of. Last week, or 2 weeks ago, I was at Xavier. They did an MLK celebration, and there's a local artist, and she did a bench. This was so beautiful, and the bench was painted. I've got pictures. I should put those up online. Where it sort of does that same kind of thing, acknowledging is it Black Lives Lost? Is that the name of the bench? Wow, I don't remember.
I know what you mean, but I can't think of the name either.
Okay, but even something like that, where it's like that particular bench will be going throughout Xavier before it's finally interred, planted. What do you do with a bench? Set. It'll be on Xavier's campus, but it's a nice little place to go to sort of reflect. It's beautiful. It's really beautiful.
Do you have a, I hope you get the historical marker, but is there like kind of a backup plan? Like if you don't-
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. The Norwood Historical Society, they can just put up their own marker.
Awesome. Okay.
So that is, the state one does have more, gravitas to it.
Yeah.
But the Norwood Historical Society could certainly do something else. And we also, Susan Daniels was talking about possibly doing some other smaller signage that maybe talked about some deeper parts of the history, sort of fleshed out. You only get a certain number of words on the marker. So she had an idea of maybe doing some smaller things throughout the park that gave information about, life in the 1920s or the particular residence. And that's actually another important thing. If anyone, John P. Parker was a huge hero in the Cincinnati area. He is a man who was born into slavery and bought himself out of slavery, and then proceeded to help, I believe, over 400 people escape, bringing them over from Kentucky into Ohio. And his home was in Ripley, Ohio, where he became a businessman and had a couple of mills, just this amazing human being. After his death, his widow and children moved to Norwood. For a while they were on Ellesmere, which is very close to where I live, and then they moved to Marsh. And they were there in the early 19-teens. And their home, they were renting, and the Bianca Parker, the daughter, was sort of paid to be the, not the housekeeper, but she was sort of she lived in the home for the owner.
Like the property manager
Property
kind of
manager.
thing?
Thank you, thank you. I'm losing all my words tonight. And during her time there, a lot of windows were broken, and that involved the health department. That was actually a strategy to get people evicted, because if you have a broken window, the home can be declared uninhabitable. And so for her, the health department was weaponized to have her evicted. And so they left Norwood and settled and moved into Madisonville. Thank you. So part of the marker will also acknowledge that. I mean, there's the school in Cincinnati, John P. Parker. He's a huge. If you haven't read his biography, I highly encourage it. So that's another sort of interesting connection to Norwood. Also, in not a great way, but the backside of the marker would be about that story, the Parkers.
Yeah, and his autobiography is called His Promised Land. We read it for my book club in December, and it was great, so. Because of the story.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because it was like, oh, there's a book about this very guy, and it's considered one of the best narratives of someone who's black in the abolitionist movement. So, because so many of them never wrote down their story, either because they were afraid or illiterate in a lot of cases, so, yeah. Anyway, sorry.
That's okay.
Off topic, but very interesting.
Fascinating
So,
guy.
anything else about either of these agenda items? All right, then we are all done, and have a good evening. Yay, thank you.
Under
See
an
you.
hour.
Yeah, exactly.